Good afternoon, gardeners. It's Sunday, February 21st, and we finally have a clear, bright, and sunny day here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. And what a start to 2021 it has been. Here on the southeastern coast, we have had miserable, non-stop rain, terrible cloudy conditions, and below average temperatures. It has just been terrible. It has been the worst start to the growing season that I have ever experienced since moving here. However, even though it's been pretty terrible here in terms of weather, it is nothing compared to the cold snap that has hit much of the middle of the country. We have seen a terrible cold snap come over the majority of the landmass of this country, with countless locations logging the coldest ever temperatures in recorded history. So what I hope to do with this video is make a timely video that will help you identify whether your landscaping or your fruit trees have been damaged or killed off. And while we're specifically talking about cold temperatures here, you could use these things to find out if your trees have been killed off in general. It doesn't just have to be cold damage. If your trees have been exposed to an intense long cold spell and you are afraid the damage may have happened due to the cold, the first thing that you should do is absolutely nothing. Cold damage usually takes a little time in order to set in, so you shouldn't be performing these tests on your trees to find out if they're alive right away. You should wait several days, possibly a week, because what cold damage does is it desiccates the tree. The reason why wood gets damaged in cold weather is because the air around it becomes very dry, and that air around your wood, it will suck the moisture out of the wood. It will actually pull the moisture away from your trees and into the ambient air. So it tends to dry out wood very badly. So that damage takes a while to show, so we must at first be patient. I suggest waiting 3, 4, 5 days, maybe even a week before you perform any of these tests, because you may get a misleading result. And just a quick tip, if you know that cold weather is coming, it's a really good idea to water your trees very well 1 to 2 days beforehand, because trees that are fully hydrated are less likely to suffer desiccating effects due to cold. A well-hydrated tree is less likely to dry out. It's not foolproof, but it does help a little bit. Now, assuming that you've waited several days to a week for the cold damage to set in, what you want to do is you want to slowly and very lightly peel away the outer layer of bark on your tree until you reach the cambium layer inside. And the cambium layer is the actively growing and expanding layer that is currently growing within the tree. The cambium layer is always green. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a knife, and I am going to ever so slightly and gently scrape away the outer bark. You cannot cut too deeply. If you cut too deeply, you will cut right past the green cambium layer and you might get a false result. So what I want to do is I just want to lightly scrape away the bark, and immediately you can see in this tree that it is in fact green. Can you see that little green layer right underneath the surface bark? If you see that little green layer underneath your surface bark, that is a living cambium layer. That means that this tree is alive and it is doing very well, at least in that piece of wood right there. And that is all that there is to it in order for you to figure out if your tree is still alive. However, when it comes time for figuring out the overall health of the tree, it might be a little bit more complicated, because sometimes when it comes to cold damage, what happens is the thinner wood on the outside branches, that wood may be killed off because it is less lignified and it is more susceptible to dieback. So what happens in the case that your branches and the outer wood has died back, but the central trunk is still alive? And this fig tree right here is a great example of what cold weather damage and dieback looks like. I received this fig tree very late last season, towards the end of summer. So the fig tree only had a couple of months to put on new growth, and a lot of this growth was still green when the winter frosts and freezes hit. So this tree did not have enough time to fully lignify and turn the new green wood into lignified, cold resistant hardwood. And as a result, I have a lot of dieback all over this tree. So right here you can see the tree trunk, and this tree trunk is quite thick and lignified, and all of this wood right here is healthy with no dieback. But once I go up to where the newer wood was, you can clearly see that this wood right here is all dried out. And right here you can see a great example as to what dieback looks like. This wood right here, it looks dried out almost like a dehydrated piece of fruit, like a raisin or a prune. And that's because that is exactly what has happened here. So if I take my knife and I scrape away the outer bark layer in this wood, you will not see any of that green cambium. So that wood right there has no green in it at all. It is colorless and lifeless. So that wood is dead. That's a great example as to what dieback will look like in your tree. So now that we have identified dieback, let's discuss what to do next. So now we've done two things. We've first identified that this tree is in fact still alive and that the cambium layer is alive and green and well in the trunk, but we have also identified that there is significant dieback on this tree. So now what we have to do is we have to cut back and remove all of the dead wood until we find living tissue. And in order to do this, we are just going to use a simple sharpened pair of pruning shears that have been cleaned. I'm going to use pruning shears on this tree because it's a young tree and all of the wood is less than ½ inch in diameter. If you have larger wood that is greater than ½ inch in diameter, you shouldn't use pruning shears. They will crush the tree. You should use a hand saw. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut back this tree until I find living cambium. So I cut away the wood and I still see that all of this wood is brown and dried out. So I'm going to keep cutting and removing the wood until I find some green wood in this branch. And right here you can clearly see in a ring around the tree there is a very small green cambium layer. So I have found living tissue in this tree right here. So success, we found the living, breathing wood to prune our trees back to. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut back all of the cold damaged branches on this tree until I find the same living green cambium layer, because that means that that wood is undamaged and unaffected by the cold. So we have successfully pruned away all of the dead wood on this tree, and although it's a lot smaller now, everything that you see in front of you is living green tissue. So come the warm season, come the spring, this tree is going to leaf out, it's going to send out new branches, and it will recover, and it will do pretty well come the end of the season. Now, one thing that I do want to warn you about is I recommend that you do not actually remove the dead wood from your tree until your last chance of frost and freeze has passed. And although I've done this for demonstration purposes, in order to help you guys who have suffered cold damage in this cold snap, it's actually not a good thing to do to your trees. And that is because that dead wood on your tree will actually protect against further future cold damage. So if we were to get a very cold low right now, because I have the new living wood completely exposed with fresh cuts, this tree is actually more likely to suffer more dieback now. That dead wood was actually preventing further dieback on this tree. So if you think that you have suffered dieback on your trees, I suggest you start investigating now with the scratch test and a knife, but don't actually do the pruning and cutting off of the dead wood until the spring truly comes and you think that the truly cold temperatures have passed you. And while I made this video right here using my fig trees as an example, I want you to know that this holds true for any tree. Right in front of me is one of my Asian persimmons, and if I simply perform the scratch test on this bark, you can clearly see that underneath the outer layer of this bark is a nice, beautiful green cambium layer. And that right there is how you determine if your tree has been killed or damaged by cold, and if it's been damaged but still alive, how to remove the dead wood back to the young, healthy wood so it comes back for you the following season. So everybody, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please hit that like button, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe for future updates and more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in my garden, everything I use is linked in the Amazon storefront in the video description. Thank you all again so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. Come on, Dale, let's show everyone your trick. Hound, pit bull. Hound, pit bull. Hound, pit bull.
Hound, Pitbull. Oh, he's all smiles, my little guy.